Hey, welcome to Ask Me Anything About Politics. If you've got any questions about politics, just let me know in the chat, and I will do my best to give you a great answer. I know that politics. Uh-oh, having some audio issues here. Oh no! Oh no! I've got no audio. What the fuck is going on? Mic is plugged in and everything. Let's see if I can fix this really quick. Sorry for the. Sorry everybody on TikTok. Where are we? Okay. Hello, and we're back. Fantastic. Boy, oh boy, that's annoying. Welcome to the live stream, everybody. My name is Jared Berenstein. This is Ask Me Anything About Politics. If you got any questions about politics, just let me know in the chat, and I will do my best to give you a great answer. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. It can be like trying to learn a new language. And so, this is the place where you can ask all of your questions about politics, and you should not have to worry about any kind of ridicule or anything like that. Gar Goyam says, was Elmo right in his political awakening? I mean, he did call some people PDF files, but he also, I believe, said some anti-Semitic things, and so, I'm gonna give him half points for that. That's a solid C, I think, in my opinion. You lose a lot of points for anti-Semitism. Any kind of religious or racial prejudice, I think, knocks you down a couple of letter grades, in my opinion. But thank you for your question, Gar Goyam. I appreciate you being here. And welcome, everybody, to Ask Me Anything About Politics. This is the live stream where you can ask anything about politics. And as long as you're asking in good faith, I will do my best to give you an objective, good faith answer. And you can ask me anything that you like. Sometimes when you're asking people questions about politics in person, you have to worry about, like, oh, if I ask this, I'm going to seem uninformed or uneducated, or if I ask this, people are going to think I'm some sort of right wing person or a left wing person. They're going to think I'm a MAGA or a fascist or a cuck or a libtard. And you don't have to worry about those kinds of judgments here. You can ask me anything that you like about politics, and so long as you are asking in good faith, then I will give you a good faith response in return. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. I know that it can feel like trying to learn a new language because there's all these different three-letter abbreviations and people that we just refer to by their last name and agency heads and various cabinet members and stuff like that. And if you don't know what these words mean, if you don't know who these people are, if you don't know what reconciliation is, or what a continuing resolution is, or the filibuster, or how does impeachment work, it can be really difficult. It can be really difficult to stay informed of what is going on in your government, to know what your government is doing, and to vote in an informed manner. Dan Blackroy, great to see you again. Or they're going to say, how did you get in my house? Yeah, that's another one. Fog War Production says, Trump isn't all bad. After all, he did unalive Jeffrey Epstein. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know if he was part of that cabal. But I would still love to see all those documents that the Trump administration is hiding, wouldn't you? But welcome, everybody. Welcome to Ask Me Anything About Politics. Prod says, what is the GOP's pathway after the Trump presidency? Specifically, who would they rally behind next? That's a really interesting question, Prod. Before we get into any substantive, answer there, I think I should point out that Trump is not planning on leaving office at the end of his term. He's going to try to stay president until he's dead. That's his entire modus operandi. And as far as who picks up the mantle after that, I don't think that it's anybody that we necessarily know right now. There are certain people who I think are jockeying for that. I think the Trump kids probably have the best chance because they have the last name, and just that name is what attracts a lot of people to the brand, the family, the legacy, like the new Kennedys, etc. But Josh Hawley is, sort of like laying down the tracks for being a fake populist. He's a fucking liar and an opportunist and a real piece of shit. Candace Owens is doing the same thing. Tucker Carlson's doing the same thing. So I think we probably see those three people going for it. But DeSantis, Paxton, Haley, none of these people have the juice. None of these people are actually going to be able to pick up the mantle. Scott Gold says, do you really believe that? Do I really believe what, Scott Gold? Fog of War Productions says, the thing is, this whole Epstein file scandal sank both his and J.D. Vance's chances, to be honest. Fog of War Productions, people have written the obituary for Trump and MAGA so many times in the past. Let's not count our chickens before they hatch. Let's see here. Dan Blackroyd, what happened the last time he was supposed to leave office? Yeah, I think that's probably what Scott Gold is referring to. Let's see here. Trans flag emoji says Hawley is an open Christian nationalist. Yeah, but what's concerning me is that he's making all these like public statements to give the impression that he is a populist, an economic populist who's trying to hold rich people's feet to the fire when he's voting in the exact opposite way. All right, the Jersey Street Rat. I say welcome back. How the fuck did you even get here? I thought I blocked you. Jersey Street Rat says Candace was right about the French Prime Minister, though. Sure, if you say so, my man. Ask a question or I'm going to boot you, I swear to God. Pakistan Pilot says, Pakistan or India, I have no dog in that fight. Dan Blackwood says, Josh Hawley has some demons that I suspect will likely prevent any rise to his presidency. Ooh, interesting. I don't know about that. Sarah Grace said, should Ghislaine be released? I mean, maybe she can, maybe she can flip. Maybe she can, what do you call it? Maybe she can turn in some people who are more powerful than her for a reduced sentence. Mad Dog says, not again. Not again what? Trans Flag says, no doubt Christian nationalists have done this before. They're Nazis. Yeah, what do you call it? The what's called the circles, these guys, what do you call these guys? The concentric circles? What's the word I'm looking for? Anyways, yeah, there's a lot of crossover in those concentric circles. I can't remember the name of. All right, Prod says, is there any sign of our global relations with Canada and Mexico repairing? Nah, it's just like out of the headlines, Canada still hates us, Mexico still hates us, but they're doing the right thing. Like Mexico sent a bunch of people to help with the floods in Texas. It's just they are trying their best. Congratulations, the Jersey Rat, you're out of here. Congratulations. They're doing their, they're keeping their eye on the prize. Like they know exactly who they should be hurting with this, and that is the Trump administration. Caleb Sin says Barenstein. That's not my last name, but also that's anti-Semitic, just to call out a Jewish person's last name. LMAOO says, can I come up? I don't usually have people come up, LMAO. But if you, Venn diagram, thank you, it's the Rocketeer, the Venn diagram of white nationalists and Nazis, there's a lot of overlap there. So LMAOO, I don't typically have people up, but if you stick around, prove to me that you're here in good faith, ask a couple of good questions, then potentially I'll change my mind. All right, scrolling down to the bottom of TikTok comments. Fog of War Production says subnational relations with Canada and Mexico are improving depending on which state you're in. James Welch says, wait, Barenstein? Don't trust this guy. That's also anti-Semitic. It's anti-Semitic just to point out people's Jewish last names and then say that makes them worse. All right, somebody with no name says, how do you feel about an oligarchy? Thumbs down on the oligarchy. Lil Boy says, why did Trump break up with Elon? There's a lot of dick measuring, pissing contests that happen in the authoritarian universe. And so who gets to be the alpha dog, who gets to be the sigma male is something, they throw a lot of elbows. And so they still recognize that their relationship is very valuable to them. So the same way that Trump is threatening Russia, the same way that he is threatening to remove government contracts for Elon, like none of that stuff actually has any weight until it's put to paper. Like the U.S. government under Trump just awarded a $200 million contract to Elon Musk's AI Grok. So yeah, I guess their fight doesn't really mean all that much, James says Trump breaks up with everyone. It's just a matter of time. Yeah, but then he'll get back together with them. This person is the worst person in the world until they say something nice to him, and then they're the greatest person in the world. Then blah blah blah. It just really is whatever suits him in the moment. Adam Smith says, how do we feel about the new economic status of Gambia after the press conference yesterday? I'm not really sure what you're referring to, Adam Smith. So sorry. Tyro Pillar said, did you watch the movie? How'd you like it? I did. I liked Superman. I thought it was good. Luke Graham says, we are also seeing the building of aluminum and steel plants in Kentucky and Texas subsidized by the government. I don't know if that's true, Luke Graham, but I'm definitely interested in looking into it. I'm not really sure what point you're trying to make there either. Prod says, is there anything serious about Elon's America Party? Absolutely not. He does not have the mental fortitude to go through the rigors of actually starting a new party. Luke Graham, he is starting copper and aluminum mines as well as tech first lithium plants in Nevada. Yeah, Luke Graham, I'm not really sure what your vibe is, my guy. Carr says, really aren't both sides equally corrupt and out for themselves? No, Carl. Republicans are worse by a lot. Lot. The Fit Hunter says, oligarchy is better than Democrats. That is not true. Also, ask a question or I'm going to boot you. Luke Graham says, what are your thoughts on Trump aiding in reindustrialization in the U.S.? That's what you're talking about. So Luke Graham, Chad Aldrich says, are you a Dem or Republican? I'm a Democrat. Rob says, how about the Democratic Socialist Movement? I'm for it. Rodney Potts says, explain why so many MAGA supporters, seeing all he has done, chose Epstein to convert. You know, I don't know how many of them are converting. I'm sure a lot of them are stamping their feet and crying right now, but they all go home, you know, when push comes to shove, when an actual election comes around. So yeah, Luke Graham, I don't know what the actual metric of, you know, factories or mines being built in this country now that Trump has started a tariff war with every other country is concerned. What everything that I have read about this tells me that the way that it is shaking out is America is losing. We are losing revenue coming in from other countries. We are losing access to valuable resources and industries in other countries. The value of the dollar and the bond market is plummeting. We're going to be seeing empty shelves in the not too near future. Inflation is accelerating for the first time. Yeah, it was going down during the Biden administration. Now it's going back up during the Trump administration. So yeah, you know, what I often find is that people who have a vested interest in advancing the right-wing ideology will sometimes pick little data points to make it seem like Trump is doing a great job when looked at holistically, looked at the net effect as opposed to the gross. It's a negative. It is a net negative for America. James Richard says, yes, what is your stance on transgender operas? They're fine, I guess. Charles Peterson says, you're lying. No, I'm not. And ask a question or I'm going to boot you. All right. Fikasika over on YouTube says, the House just voted on the Epstein files. How the Republicans pulled this off, hiding the Epstein files, one of their most talking points. Fikasika, yeah. Don't you think it's interesting that the Republican Party just voted to block releasing the Epstein information to the American public? Don't you think that's weird, Fikasika? I think it's weird. I think it's weird that Dan Bongino and Kash Patel, two right-wing conspiracy theorists who have been yelling and screaming about the government hiding all this Epstein information, where the people in charge of the FBI have been Republicans for like 2 decades. They've been yelling and screaming about it, how it's protecting high-level Democrats and shit like that. But now that they're all in power, they're saying there's nothing there, and they're voting against releasing that information. I think that's interesting. Let's see here. James Richards says, beta male. That's not what your mom called me last night. Charles Peterson says, no, I don't. Every other politician didn't release it either. None of them are going to. Charles Peterson, the only person who could release it is the FBI. And the FBI has been under the control of Republican appointees for like 2 decades. Bella says, anyone find it funny how MAGA fell off? LOL. I mean, have they fallen off? They're still in power. Tyboy says, why does Israel, the military-industrial complex, and big oil run foreign policy? Because they're very powerful, you know? Israel has a lobbying group called AIPAC that is extremely well-funded, and they are able to orchestrate how a bunch of billionaires spend their campaign dollars. And yeah, because of decisions like Citizens United that have injected the influence of money into politics, people that have a lot of money and influence are able to dictate policy, you know? And if you don't like that, you should vote for Democrats because they're the only ones who will try to stop that. Fogger War Production says, I mean, being a Trump supporter was a lot of fun in 2016, not so much now. I mean, I'm glad it's less fun, you know? It's the Rocketeer says, the vote to stop the release was 211 to 210. Sure would have been nice if Dems filled those 3 dead seats by now. Is that the vote count? It's the Rocketeer? I literally just was looking at it, and it was voted down in committee by the Republican Party. Everybody on the Democratic side voted yes. But I'll look into it. It's the Rocketeer. You know, I trust you. You're good people. Jim 68116 says I bought gas for $2.77 in Orlando today. It was $3.39 last month. Maybe, I don't know if that's true. Ty Boy says, LOL, Democrats support Israel and military-industrial complex. Yes, but there are more Democrats in the Democratic Party. There are more politicians in the Democratic Party who are willing and excited to stand up to Israel and military complex than there are in the Republican Party. The Republican Party is full, chock full, 100% on board with Israel and the military-industrial complex. Wyatt says thoughts about the big issues in big pharma. Specifically SSRI and vaccines. Human Health and Human Services currently being run by RFK Jr., who does not believe in science. He does not believe in using science to try to make good policy decisions. So we are all going to be less healthy and less safe in the future because of that. And I will say this, that there was just a very troubling report that came out. Hold on a second, I saved it. I want to make sure that I can bring it up for you guys. This should be a concern to everybody. Secret changes to major U.S. health data sets raise alarm. A new study reports that more than 100 United States government health data sets were altered this spring under RFK Jr. without any public notice. Isn't that interesting? Why would that happen? I don't know. Seems pretty interesting to me. Alrighty, let's get back into these. Let's get back into some of these comments. Tyro Pillar, how are they allowed to vote with no representation? What do you mean? Who is allowed to vote with no representation? David Douglas says, I wonder if AIPAC is using taxpayer money, not the public financing of elections I was hoping for. I mean, is AIPAC using taxpayer money? I mean, probably indirectly, the way that money is fungible. I don't think it's allocated to them, but I think it gets to them, you know, circuitously. Arrow Abraham says, I know you're not interested in 28 predictions, but curious on your thoughts on Kamala running again. She can do whatever you like. Let the primary sort it out. Fogger Productions, studying the NGA, there seems to be a huge gulf between governors and congressmen. Why is that? Fogger Productions, tell me what the NGA is. I'm not familiar with that abbreviation. Wyatt says, why won't a president register AIPAC under FARA? So AIPAC uses a very sneaky method to avoid being registered as a foreign agent by saying that they aren't lobbying for the government of Israel. They're lobbying for the relationship between the government of Israel and the government of America. It's shady. They are far-right extremists. I do not care for AIPAC, and I will hope that we elect the kind of Democratic politicians in the future that will stand up to AIPAC and potentially close that loophole. R.L. Stafford says, do you think the Supreme Court is too political? It is now. And yes, 100%. Wyatt says, already did that one. Prod says, the Luigi case caused any significant change in the healthcare industry? Not as far as I can tell. I think there were a couple of things that happened, like perfunctorily at the time. Yeah, I'm not really sure. Tyro says those Dem seats that are empty. Yeah, I don't know. That's not what I read today at all, Tyro. That's not what I read today. It's the Rocketeer. I'll look more into this, but literally before the live stream, I checked. Somebody posted the vote to Reddit, and it was just all no's, like 90% no's on the Republican side and all yays on the Democratic side. But I'll look into that and see what the deal is there. National Governors Association. Okay, so studying the national government, there seems to be a huge gulf between governors and congressmen. Why is that? What do you mean by huge gulf? Fogger War Productions. Let's see here. I can't read your name. Says, didn't the company try to change things, but then their shareholders sued them? What company? Let's see here. Oh, yeah, you're talking about United Healthcare. Didn't the company try to change it when the shareholders sued them? Potentially. I'm not up on the latest of that case. Mr. Jokester says, when did Bradley Cooper get here? Stop. You're going to make me blush. Jim, 68116 says, Ron DeSantis versus AOC, who wins in a presidential election? I mean, Ron DeSantis has all the charm of the bottom of a shoe, so I give that to AOC. All right. Yeah, thank you everybody for the questions so far. My name is Jarrett. This is Ask Me Anything About Politics, and I'm here to answer all of your questions about politics. Fogger Productions, the NGA unanimously opposed the SNAP Medicare provisions of the BBB. Yeah, because governors are more intimately connected to what is going on in their state. So the governor is the one who is going to have to hear from more citizens about all of these cuts. Why did this hospital cut down? Why can I no longer get this covered? Where are my benefits? Why did I get kicked off of Medicare, et cetera? And so they're the ones that are like, this is really going to hurt my constituents. And it is a lot easier for a House member to survive this kind of political environment than a governor who is viewed at as more as a more concrete connection between people's daily lives. So yeah, I think this is just mostly just politics. Maybe some of them are like really care about their constituents, but mostly I think they're just worried about getting reelected. Again, I can't read your name. Thunderstruck says AOC has the intelligence of a rock. That's not true, Thunderstruck. She's very smart. Why would you say something like that? Is it because she's a woman? Is it because she's a woman of color? Wow, yeah, why would you say that? Let's see here. How long will it take to undo the destruction of government agencies? It depends on how many people do the work. If people like you and me do the work, then we can put the country back on track, lickety split. But if not, it is directly related to how many people get involved in politics. Cheryl C598 says governors have to manage a whole state. They have to balance the budget. That is accurate. Prod says personal opinion. Which companies' independent sources are still good for current events? So mostly, I think you just have to avoid right-wing channels. If you get a combination of legacy media, centrist media, progressive media, foreign media, then you're generally pretty good. But I don't really parse out, the New York Times versus the AP versus the Guardian UK versus, the New Republic versus the Atlantic. It's just all. I think you just need to get your news from multiple sources. Sir Williamson III says your last name and then laughing emoji. That is anti-Semitism. Cheryl, all right. Wyatt says, do you agree that you won't support a tax bill until they make a surplus and attempt to fix the debt? The debt is an issue that the right wing of this country has been using as a political cudgel for a really long time. And for a long time, it really hasn't made that big of a dent. But the debt is gotten to the point and interest rates are so high that it is actually becoming an issue. And so, where I'm concerned about spending is just in how we are allowing rich people and giant corporations to skirt paying their fair share of taxes. When we invest money into welfare programs, when we invest money into Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security and public education and stuff like that, that stuff pays us back, by a factor of like 10x. It is just these bullshit cuts to billionaires' taxes. It is just these loopholes where, companies like Walmart are getting away with paying their employees, fucking slavery wages so that they have to go on, government assistance to be able to afford food and shit like that. That's what is creating the deficit. That is what's creating such an incredible debt, Brett C says, what do politicians from each party actually agree on? That's a really weird, not to say weird, it's a difficult question to answer, Brett C, because what they say in public versus what they actually believe there tends to be like a pretty wide gulf there. I put a lot more credence in the things that Democrats say on the news versus what they believe in their hearts than I do the Republican Party, because I've just read too many stories about Republicans going out there and saying climate change isn't real and then running around behind closed doors being like, you guys got to do something about this because I'm really worried about the future for my kids, shit like that. But yeah, as far as like the voters are concerned, like there's a lot of crossover. It's just that the billionaire class is convincing us that we don't agree on these things. Let's see here. Eve Sepulveda says there was a bill against only built. Not really sure what that means. Custom Game Room 2U says, why would I ask you? I know how politics work. All right, well, you don't have to do anything that you don't want to do, man. Nobody's forcing you to be here. Mischief says, Bill Clinton started a program of job retraining if unemployed 2 weeks. It was the biggest program. I don't know if that's true, Mischief, and I don't know if you're saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. Raven Elise says, there is June surplus due to tariffs. Is that just conservative spin and the backlash is coming? Yes, it is conservative spin. We have increased some revenue by taxing people who are buying things. They raise taxes on the 99% by putting these tariffs on everything. And so, yeah, that money was not there before. So good for them. They made poor people suffer more. Mr. Wonderful says climate change is just another opportunity for Democrats to launder our tax money. You know, I got to be honest with you, Mr. Wonderful. My patience is on the floor today, so I'm just not even going to warn you. You're out of here. Caveman Prime says Donald Trump is God. What a weird fucking thing to say. How embarrassing to say something like that. Xander says Democrats are right wing to the rest of the world and left wing in America, but people always tell me no. So Xander, I agree that there are people in the Democratic Party who are more conservative than people in left wing parties in other countries, but we also have the best politicians. We have the progressives that are actually left wing in the Democratic Party. So I don't agree with that framing. Though I will say that, you know, like on the net, the American Democratic is probably more centrist than other left-leaning parties in other countries. RJ says, do you have a real job? I do. I fuck your mom. Mischief says, Citizens United, why did the fight against that go away? It has not stopped, Mischief. You know, the Democrats are still trying to undo it. Representative Tlaib put forward a constitutional amendment to undo Citizens United. And if we had more Democrats in the House and the Senate, and we had a Democratic president, we might be able to actually pass that. Sugar and Tequila says, who are the best two options for the Democratic Party? Are you talking about for president in 28? I never talk about that. I'm trying to get everybody focused on the midterms in 2026. Strider297 says, do you have any weightlifting advice? I guess just go slow and be careful. Xander says, I'm a Republican. I just wanted your opinion. Thank you. Xander, Democrats. Oh, yeah, sure. Okay. Why are you Republican, Xander? You are welcome here. David Douglas says, Rahm Emanuel, Cuomo, Biden, all center right. I don't disagree with that, but Biden ran as a progressive. You know, he had 4 years in office and he did fucking FDR shit. Let's see here. Brian first says, careful what you say. TikTok is soft. Yeah, I don't think I've said anything all that, what do you call it? All that controversial or anything. May says, we're just scrolling past you as you mentioned your real job. Don't mind me while I drop a follow. Thank you, May. I really appreciate that. All right, welcome to the live stream, everybody. My name is Jared. I'm here to answer all of your questions about politics. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. I'm here to engage in good faith. If you're just here to call me a cuck, maybe I'll get a little spicy, but mostly I answer questions fully, sincerely, and as objectively as I possibly can. Xander says, I'm thinking of becoming independent. I just agree with small government and low taxes. Are there government programs that you think are valuable, Xander? Joni Calder says, are they some kind of election in in Arizona today? I don't know if there's an election in Arizona today. Xander says, and I agree with social issues with the Republican Party more. Okay, well, I'd love to talk to you about that, Xander. Strider297 says, how do we fix this border problem and uphold our laws? So Strider, what do you think is the problem with the border as it stands? Either during the Trump administration or the Biden administration? Because immigrants on the net are a positive in this country. It is more valuable to have them here than to kick them out. It is also a giant waste of money to intern them in concentration camps and deport them to El Salvador and shit like that. So I don't really understand what the problem is that we're trying to solve here. Xander says, I'd love to know as well. Maybe you can change my mind, says Xander. Oh, about like government programs that you agree with. Yeah, we can talk about it, man. All right, let's see here. Matthew Muldoon says, how can we make public schools better without utilizing school choice? I don't like school choice, but schools need to be better. I mean, I think just let's fund our public schools. You know, the Republican Party has been slowly chipping away at education funding for a really long time, and that's the reason why our children are less well educated and less well prepared and less competitive on the world stage, you know? It's the reason why so many more people believe in conspiracy theories and why they are falling in love with their AI, you know, chatbots, significant others and shit like that. So yeah, just fund it, you know, like don't put money into school voucher programs, put money into public schools. Susie says, why don't the Democrats in Congress stop compromising with Republicans? Susie, the Democrats don't have any political power right now. There's nothing that they can do without, you know, working with Republicans on stuff. But yeah, you know, as far as I can tell, they have been doing a really good job of just sort of like putting their foot down and being like, we're not going to help you guys do any of this bullshit, you know? Let's see here. Clunk says, anything you say? How do you feel about CCCP drones ban? The Chinese Communist Party banning drones. I don't know. Like, are they, is it clogging the skies over China? I don't know. I don't know anything about that issue, but man. Gabriel says thoughts on recent Supreme Court ruling regarding the Department of Education. It's so the I think the one you're referring to is there was a Supreme Court ruling that basically said that parents are allowed to opt their children out of certain things in the curriculum if they do not align with their religious beliefs. So if a character in a book is gay or a woman with a job or something and they don't like that, then they can exempt their child from that part of their education. And aside from being sort of like morally the wrong thing to do, so we're gonna be encouraging a type of religion that makes it seem like certain people are other or less than. It's also just like really logistically impractical. Like every parent is going to have to look at every single thing that is taught in your public school and they get to write a note like, I don't want my kid learning about slavery. I don't want my kid learning about gay people. I don't want my kid learning about, this. Like we've already made the job of being a teacher hellish, where they have to be fucking taking bullets for their students. They have, 80 kids per classroom. They have to spend their own money on pencils and folders and binders and shit like that. We are dragging them down with a bunch of right-wing red tape, regulatory capture bullshit that does not need to be there. And now on top of that, they're going to have to individually tailor every one of their lessons to every single one of their fucking students. It's madness, man. It's fucking nonsense. Mama Beer says, are you a parent? Not at the moment. Zara says, don't liberals have a religion where Christians and conservatives are seen as less than? No, we do not, Zara's. Gabriel says, no, new one from yesterday allowing Trump to fire en masse the Department of Education. I did hear about that one, and that is really, really concerning, and I do not know why the two liberal justices joined that opinion. I'm with Ketanji Brown Jackson on most things. Xander says, I'm also rooting for a Democrat in 2028 and a liberal in the midterm, so I don't know if I'm a Republican. I mean, listen, Xander, no tea, no shade. I really appreciate you being here. I want to get into this with you, man, and I hope that even after the live stream, you'll send me a DM and we can really get into these issues. Let's see here. Edith Putty says, I went to a very large high school and max had 30 to 40 kids in my classes. Okay. I don't know what argument you're trying to make there. Let's see here. Ethan Walschlager, great to see you again. What's the state of Ukraine and Russia? I'm confused. Is the war over? The war is not over. Donald Trump is pissed off because Putin he finally figured out that Putin is dog walking him, and so now he is pretending to play hardball, but he will, I'm guessing, go home to Putin if Putin just, apologizes or makes it worth his while or something like that. What Trump is concerned about is the look of it. He does not like how it looks when he says he went out there and, and had a great productive talk with Putin, and then hours later, Putin sends more rockets into Ukraine than he ever had before. He doesn't like how that makes him look. He's like, dude, just kill as many fucking Ukrainian children as you want, man, but do it subtler, please, and then once they make that agreement, then he's going to go, oh my God, Putin's so great, he's so smart, he's such a strong leader, blah, blah, blah. Hanziek1 Twitch says, how would you personally try to fix the deficit? Tax the rich. David W. says, Russian TV going to start talking about Trump Epstein. Maybe. I don't know. Yeah, they have not had the Russian government and Russian state TV has never pulled back on their negative reporting of the Trump administration. They've thanked them for doing all the things that they have done for them, but they have also, thrown a ton of shade at Trump. So yeah, it's a lot of dick measuring contests that happen between authoritarianisms. Deborah Newby says it's because they're paid for by the left. No, they're not, Deborah Newby. I don't even know what you're talking about, but I know that what you just said. The left owns lots of media. No, Deborah Newby, billionaires own the media, and billionaires are right-wing by nature because they want the taxes cut and they want the regulations cut. Deborah, are you here in good faith? Do you want to actually engage, or are you just here to spread propaganda? Because if it's the latter, then I'm gonna boot you. Foghorn Productions says, do you think border security and immigration can be two separate issues? Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. we can have a secure border. Absolutely. And we could also have a non-barbaric humanitarian immigration policy. Alrighty, let's see here. El Toro Pero Locos. The bull crazy dog? The crazy bulldogs. That's got to be that. I'm learning Spanish. El Toro Pero Locos says, how can Newsom win in 2028 after he keeps getting caught on these podcasts? I don't know if you can get caught on a podcast. Like, he is deciding to do these. You know what I mean? Deborah Newby says, did you see the amazing welcome Trump got in Qatar? Made me proud to be an American. Wow. Yeah, you're not here at good faith, Deborah. I can't wait to block you. All right. So, yeah, El Toro, what Gavin Newsom is doing is he's trying to create a centrist case for himself going into the presidential election in 2028. So where he does a podcast with Charlie Kirk and talks about how he kind of sympathizes with people who have anti-trans messaging, he believes that that is going to make him more viable in the general election. Whether or not he's going to win the primary with all that shit, like, that's an open question. He's definitely not my first choice for president. That Dungeon Punk says, no question, just want to say thanks for my favorite Jim water bottle. Oh, cool. Thank you. I appreciate you getting that. Sam Hyatt says, don't tell us what you think. I mean, people are asking. Edith Puthy says, what statistics on how many billionaires are on each side? 75% of all billionaire political donations go to the Republican Party, Edith Puthy. And there's a lot of other circumstantial evidence to suggest that the connection there is intimate. There are more billionaires in Donald Trump's cabinet than any president has ever had in the history of America. The Republican Party consistently cuts regulations for billionaires, cuts taxes for their corporations and for them personally, allows them access to loopholes so that they can pay their employees less. They go harder against unions than they do giant corporations, which gives them more negotiating power against unions and against workers. It makes way more sense that a Republican, that a billionaire who wants to keep all the money and power that they've accumulated and get even more would support Republicans over Democrats. Ethan Walschlager says, why did Trump not help Texas more? That's a really good question, Ethan. So one of the underlying things, there's all these like givens in regards to like figuring out why Trump did one thing or another, partisan politics, getting people to fight amongst themselves, blaming other people for things. But people forget how lazy and incompetent he is. So it's not that he didn't want to help the people of Texas. It just would have been a lot of work, and he did not want to do that work. Also, he and his entire team have been defunding all of the various agencies that would help with things like, extreme weather events. And so they were unprepared, and there were not people in charge who knew how to do that, and they did not have the resources that are usually available to them. So it was just laziness and incompetence, where he's like, why would I do something when I cannot do something and just blame a Democrat instead? Alrighty, let's see here. Hanzik Twitch says, you can't just ban a guy for being a patriotic Trump supporter type. People that don't agree with you aren't always trying to argue in bad faith. No, I'm on Hanziek1 Twitch. I can ban anybody that I want. The rule that I have on my live stream is if you ask a question, I don't care if you're a Republican, if you're a Democrat, if you're a MAGA person. But if you are just spamming my comments with right-wing propaganda, then I boot you, and it's my live stream, so that's my rule. But I appreciate you being here, Hanzi. I appreciate your question. And I hope that my stance on this does not turn you off from my live stream going forward. David W. says, if you are a Trump supporter, you are not patriotic. I agree with that. But also, hold on a second, David W. I want to backtrack on that for a little bit. People that are Trump supporters, there are all different kinds. There are people who are shitty because they are rich people who do not care that their tax cuts are going to hurt and potentially kill lots and lots of people. And then there are people who are just hardcore racists who like the fact that the Republican Party is hurting marginalized groups of people. But I think the vast majority of right-wing voters, they just got tricked. They just got conned. They are living in an information bubble that is convincing them that this is the right thing to do. And I think that we need to have radical empathy for all these types of people, except for the rich ones and the racist ones, of course. So yeah, when I am lobbying accusations at Republicans, what I mean is Republican politicians and right-wing talking heads like Ben Shapiro and Tim Pool and shit like that. David Douglas says, no, they weren't tricked. They hate Democrats. They were tricked into hating Democrats, David Douglas. Sam Hyatt says, you don't deserve any power in a Christian country. I don't. I mean, I don't have any, so I don't know what you're talking to. I Light a Hot Girl says, "Is it hard to trump the president's logic?" I don't know what you mean by that. The Crystal Dreamer says, "Do you think it's a racist moral problem with the majority of MAGA?" I don't know. I don't know. There's also like different levels of racism. There's people that are like, "I'm a fucking racist and I like it," and then there's people like, "I'm not a racist. My barber is black," you know. And but then they won't like let their daughter date a Mexican or some shit like that, you know. So it's difficult. I would not, put what do you call it? I would not ascribe any percentages to the various divisions in in those categories, you know. All right. Hanzi Quick Twitch says, "Did you see my question about the deficit? If so, I didn't hear your reply because my Wi-Fi went out. LOL." It was a really quick answer, Hanzi. So maybe you didn't. It was easy to miss. But I basically just said tax the rich. Tax the rich. Use that money to invest in the lower classes. The lower classes then use that money to boost up the economy, and then it just starts paying for itself. Basically, it's Keynesian economics. Coach Black says, "Is it racist to require an ID to vote?" So on the face, Coach Black, no. But in reality, yes. Like if you ask Republican politicians, if you could force them to tell the truth, and we know this to be the case because they have admitted this like in their private meetings. We have the data on this. We have the reporting on this. If you ask them why they did voter ID laws, they will tell you that Democratic voters tend to not have IDs more than Republican voters because they are poor or they are black or they are Mexicans or whatever. And so that's why they did that. They did that to win elections, to suppress the vote of marginalized people. And so part of that is racism. Coach Black says, "So is it racist to require an ID to get a gun, i.e. another race?" I can't walk into an elementary school with my vote and murder 100 kids. So I don't think that there's a problem with requiring an ID to get a gun. I don't think it's a problem with requiring an ID to get a gun because gun manufacturers don't have access to the kind of voter roll data that the election boards have. There's a difference between those two issues, Coach Black. Let's see here. Coach Black says either ID is racist or not. It really doesn't seem like you care, Coach Black. It seems like you're trying to prove a point. Ethan Walschlager says, "I think guns should be less regulated." Do you think that would decrease gun violence, Ethan? Vic Martin says, "How many steps has Trump actually done or attempted to turn U.S. from a democracy into an autocracy?" I mean, many, Vic Martin. Many, many, many. Let's see here. User a whole bunch of numbers says, "Worst school unaliving wasn't even with a gun." I find that very hard to believe. User a whole bunch of numbers. Prod says, "Why doesn't Gavin Newsom the ability to prevent the ICE raids in his state?" The Supreme Court has ruled against Gavin Newsom trying to kick both the military out of California and return the National Guard to his control. So the federal government, which has more access to weapons and bodies and are more militarized than the LAPD, what is he going to do? The LAPD is going to get into a fucking gunfight with the Marines? Like, that's not really a viable thing that we can do in the future. Kanitsuki. We got a bunch of questions over here. Ron Russell says, "How did you celebrate the 4th of July? How can you be a patriot and love America but not fall into nationalism?" I didn't celebrate because I don't care for what America is doing these days. And how can you be a patriot and love America but not fall into nationalism? There's a difference between loving your country and ignoring its problems. A nationalist believes that America is perfect. A patriot believes that America can be better. Let's see here. Crazy how there's almost no politicians in America who are completely against the Second Amendment. It's not a great issue for politicians in America, Hansi. Even if you have strong beliefs that guns should be more regulated, you have to not say that because otherwise the NRA will put a bunch of money towards unseating you. All right. Wait. Okay, I Let a Hot Girl says, "Is your hair better than Rick Perry's?" Yes. Brian says, "Do you agree that mandatory reserve enlisting for a year after high school to help with patriotism?" I don't think so. Southern Eagle says, "So do you think that advancing our high school education system would defend against misinformation?" I do. Flag of War Production says, "Nations often reach authoritarianism on the path they take to avoid it." I don't know if that's accurate, Flag of War Productions. Already scrolling up on these comments. Let's see if we got any great comments. Come in shop 6921 says, do you think no tax overtime will ever get passed? So they did pass a version of no tax on overtime in the BBB, I believe, but it is crumbs. It is crumbs. It is. They're giving so much more money to the rich, and they are increasing the financial burden on anybody who would have made out on overtime on tips. But I could be wrong about that. It's no taxes on tips that they passed. I can't remember if they did overtime also. So sorry, come in shop. Let's see here. Ethan Walschlager says, do you believe in white privilege and in what form? Yes, I do believe in white privilege, but that does not mean that just because you are white or a male means that your life is easy. It just means that if you are a black person or a woman or Latino or LGBTQ, then your life is automatically harder. Let's see here. Brian says, will AI benefit the lower class and generate new wealthy, or only the rich will benefit? Only the rich will benefit, Brian. Ethan Walschlager says, do you think less gun regulations would decrease gun violence? No, I think more gun regulations would decrease gun violence. Amber says, have we already opened the can of worms in regard to missing files that was on Bondi's desk? I don't know what you mean as far as like opening the can of worms, but people do seem to be more activated towards getting this information on both sides of the aisle. And so, yeah, I say fucking, Trump said he's going to do this. Let's fucking hold his feet to the fire. He said he was going to end the war in the Ukraine in day one. He said he was going to end the war in Gaza day one. He said he was going to bring down prices day one. All that shit was lies, Let's see here. Brandon Anon says, you missed me twice. How many kids do you think Trump molested with Epstein? I have no idea. I feel like that is a question that if I tried to answer it, it would get me booted from TikTok. Fog War Productions says it happened to the Roman Republic and Revolutionary France. Yes. So 2 examples, Fog War Productions. I love you. You know that you're a regular. I have a lot of space for you in my heart. That is 2 examples. The Roman Republic and Revolutionary France. But there are many, many other examples of that not happening, I believe. Racy T said he would be a dictator on day one, and he's trying. He's doing his best. Tebow 2004 says, why is birthright citizenship being contested all of a sudden? I think it's just racism, Tebow. I think that Stephen Miller, who is the shadow president of America right now, is a racist, and he wants to get rid of marginalized people, brown people, black people, and stopping people who were born here, whose parents were from other countries, from being able to stay here as citizens is part of his attempt to completely whitewash America. Ethan Walschlager says, can you expand on why less gun policies would increase gun violence? Sure. So I think that if you look at the countries that have less gun violence than America, which is basically all of them, they have rules, they have regulations, they have fewer guns. And so we have a culture that celebrates guns in America that I think would be really difficult to untie. But I think step 1 could be just, let's increase the safety around owning a gun. Let's increase regulations around owning a gun. If you want to own a gun, why do I need to make it easy for you to have something that you could potentially use to murder another person? Let's say a license to own a gun. You have to have a license to own a gun. The same way you have to have a license to own a car. You have to have insurance to own a gun. The same way you have to have insurance to own a car. Let's say mandatory background checks so that that get rechecked every now and again to make sure that you've not just become a domestic abuser, because domestic abusers who have access to firearms statistically are way more likely to murder their spouse. There's common sense things that we can do to try to decrease gun violence that aren't just taking everyone's guns away, as the right tends to complain about. So why not? So why not try doing that stuff? The only reason why I can think of is because there are a lot of people who get very butthurt about the idea of making it a little bit more difficult to own a gun, Boomsnap says, because EID, the answer could ever be no. That's why we have the Second Amendment. Not really sure what you mean by that. Andrew J. Rivers, my good old buddy. Do you think Trump regrets cutting PBS funding after finding out Elmo is racist? Excellent question, Andrew J. Rivers. You're 10 out of 10, my guy. All right, let me see here. Tyro Pillar says green salsa or red salsa. I like them both, but mostly green, I would say. Ron Russell says, care to rant about Citizens United and how getting money out of our political system would improve it. Bernie is pushing this on his oligarchy tour, and I tend to agree. Absolutely, Ron Russell. So Citizens United has been part of a big project by the billionaire class to be able to use their money to sway elections. The reason why they want to do this is because they want to deconstruct the government. They want to have no government, so they don't have to pay taxes, and they don't have to have any regulations around what they can and cannot put into our water supply and shit like that. The billionaire class, they have all these factories and chemical plants and shit like that, and they don't want there to be rules about how much they have to pay their employees or how safe they have to make their factory lines, or what they have to do with chemical runoffs from their factories. They just want to be able to pour it into our drinking waters that our kids fucking drink it and they all get fucking cancer and die. Like, they don't fucking give a shit. And so Citizens United opens the door to how much billionaires could put money into politics. And they have responded in kind. And now we have the most expensive elections in the history of this country because of that. The Democratic Party is working on undoing Citizens United, but they have not had enough political power in government to make that happen since it was decided by the Supreme Court. So yeah, the project is still the same, guys. Vote for Democrats so that we can undo this bullshit. Alrighty. Fikasika says Elon has floated the idea of a third party focusing on specific seats that are winnable and then play a deciding vote. Your thoughts? I don't doubt that Elon could potentially try to primary some vulnerable politicians that he does not like. I do not think that he's going to be starting a new political party. Maybe he will name those candidates as part of some political party, but that's not like, he's not going to be a national political party. It's not going to have the infrastructure of an actual political party. Braden says, what do you know about the Bath riots? Nothing. Mike Todd says, what's the greatest president ever? I don't know. Adam says, do they not care or just not know the long-term effects of things? Are you talking about the billionaire class? I think that they don't care. They believe that their money will protect them from it. That's why fucking Mark Zuckerberg built a bunker in Hawaii, and why at Davos they're constantly asking psychologists, like, how do I keep my security team from overpowering me during an apocalypse situation? Like, I still want to be king during the apocalypse, but obviously if money doesn't mean anything, then how do I keep my security guards in line? Let's see here. Sean says, hosts lives in a movie. None of that is happening. I don't make anything up, Sean. So if you have any specific issues with things I'm saying, let me know, and I will happily send you whatever resources I have to show you that what I'm saying are accurate. Mike Todd says, come on, give me a name at least. I don't know who the best president was. There have been good presidents and there have been bad presidents. I can tell you who the worst president is, and that is our current one. David Douglas says 1/3 of cops would lose their guns if you did domestic violence checks. That sounds pretty good to me, David Douglas. Let's fucking do it, man. Also, you know who would love stronger gun regulations is the police. They have said this multiple times. Like, let's have more gun regulations. It would make our jobs easier. All right, scrolling on the bottom, Joshua Automates says, thoughts on libertarianism. Hey, Lauren, good to see you again. Thoughts on libertarianism. So the nicest thing that I can say about libertarianism is I get it, but we've tried it and it doesn't work. The meanest thing I can say about libertarianism is that it is a fake movement created by the billionaire class. If you read the book Dark Money by Jane Mayer, she outlines in excruciating detail how for a generation the billionaire class has been propping up the libertarian movement so they don't have to pay taxes and they don't have to regulate the chemical runoff that is coming out of their factories that poison all of our children and put us all into an early grave. Lesbian, great to see you again. Sociopaths gravitate towards position of power. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Racy T says, let's stop victimizing children, women, and brown people. I agree with that. Raven Elise says, have you ever listened to Knowledge Fights? No, I have not. Mike Todd says, dang, worse than Buchanan is crazy, not gonna lie. Yeah. Buchanan. Yeah. Alrighty. Dina K says, what about globalists and the problem of all? The problem of all? What do you mean by the problem of all? So globalists, the issue that I have with the term globalist is that people on the right tend to use it to mean Jews. And, when I was a younger man and there was not so much anti-Semitism, anti-Semitism weirdly goes up and down in this country. It's a little bit like the weather. Like, as a Jewish person, you just kind of have to put your hand outside the door and be like, how anti-Semitic is my country today? It's really anti-Semitic these days, and so I'm very concerned about that kind of thing. And I'm on a hair trigger about it. So yeah, I don't love throwing the word globalist around when people tend to mean Jewish people. But the idea of globalists is bad. The idea that people that believe in creating a more global system, a more global world order where countries are trading with each other and people are flying to other countries and hiring people from other countries and speaking each other's languages and stuff like that. I don't view that as necessarily bad. There's definitely been some growing pains as far as we are shipping jobs over to other countries so that billionaires can make a ton of money, and then people are sentenced to generations in poverty because they lost the auto plant job that they thought was going to be there for their entire life. But again, that is just the fault of the American government not taking care of its citizens, which again is the platform of the Republican Party, not the platform of the Democratic Party. There are ways that we can do this that help everybody as opposed to only help the rich and the powerful. And really, I don't know if there's a way that we stop that at this point. Like, travel is becoming easier, energy is becoming better. I mean, it was until the Trump administration. Telecommunications is becoming much more easily accessible. Like, we are connected to each other. That's just yeah. We can be in any country in the world in less than 24 hours. It is, yeah, we're living in a global world right now. And I think we need to start embracing that. And we can have the people that protect specific cultures and make sure that not every city looks identical to each other. But, this is just going to happen. Dina K says there's free energy, but globalists won't let you use it. Again, do you mean Jews, Dina K? It kind of sounds like you mean Jews. Matthew says, thoughts on Republicans blocking the release of the files in the list? They will do whatever Daddy Trump tells them to do, and Daddy Trump does not want that list to be out there because apparently it would be very incriminating to him. Shanti Flytrap says, have you noticed an increase in hate violence? Would you correlate that to the current administration? Yes, 100%. The FBI has data on this. Ever since the rise of Trump, hate crimes for every marginalized group of people, from Jews to African Americans to Asian people, has all gone up exponentially. Ron Russell says, what are your thoughts on Bitcoin and getting free of the central banking system, Bitcoin as a national reserve? I have not seen a single good use case for Bitcoin, except where funding like terrorism and other criminal activities is concerned. It is a massive waste of electricity, as is artificial intelligence. I just don't buy it. I just don't buy it. I have not seen anything from stablecoin world to suggest that there is any value to it whatsoever. Let's see here. Dragon Ball Simp says, bro looks like a conservative. Well, I'm not. Oh, Kanetsuki says, also I noticed the US flag in the background of the stream portrays a different star layout, like it has one less star, I think. What is that about? The reason why that is because I Googled American flag and took the first picture that I saw. I do not believe that one of the states is a state. Luke Zoo says, what kind of superhero are you? I've always felt that I've always related most to Spider-Man because I'm clever and I'm sassy. Sedge94 says, do you feel like the left went too radical and now doesn't have a platform to recruit new voters? I do not believe that, CJ94. Depending on who you ask, the Democratic Party is both too far to the left and too far to the right and doing too much and doing too little. It is Schrodinger's political party, where no matter what they do or no matter what they say, they are wrong for every possible reason. And the reason why we have this idea of the Democratic Party being that way is because the billionaire class wants to take the Democratic Party down. And so they have been infiltrating every avenue of information, from right-wing media to legacy media to social media, with a variety of narratives that make it seem like the Democratic Party is bad. And so there are lots of people out there who would tell you that the Democratic Party is too extreme And there are a bunch of people out there who will also tell you that they're too centrist, they are too close to being Republicans. Gen X says, do you support Mamdani in NYC? Yes, I do. And in fact, I would encourage people to continue to support Mamdani, even though he won the primary. He is the presumptive winner of the New York mayoral election. The billionaire class is not going to stop trying to take him down. And if he wins the general election, the billionaire class will then move towards smearing him, and they will move towards torpedoing his agenda in any way they possibly can. So if you believe in Mamdani's mission and you live in New York, then continue to support him even after he wins the election. Let's see here. Lesbian says, actually, the center line has moved too far to the right. I agree with that. Matthew Muldoon says, would you agree Democrats have to work harder for votes? It's hard to find a happy medium for Democratic candidates. I do agree that Democrats have to work harder for votes, but I don't think that has anything to do with their politicians or their policies. I think it has to do everything with the electoral systems that we've built in America. Electorally, the Democrats are at a disadvantage because of the Senate map, gerrymandering, and the Electoral College. Financially, Democrats are at a disadvantage because the Republican Party is aligned with the richest people on the globe, including in adversarial nations like in Russia. Information-wise, the Democrats are at a loss because the billionaire class has completely captured all forms of media. Even legacy, sources like the New York Times have been bullied into watering down negative coverage of Republicans and overhyping negative coverage of Democrats in order to seem as neutral as they possibly can be. And lastly, the Democrats are at a disadvantage because they are a rainbow coalition, and it is really difficult to organize a group that is made up of a bunch of little groups, as opposed to the Republican Party, which is much more of a monolith. So yeah, the Democrats have been playing on fucking X Games mode for over a generation. The Republicans have just been fucking running ramshod over our electoral systems, installing corrupt extreme right-wing judges into every level of the judiciary. Yeah, it's part of the reason why I don't believe in, taking pot shots at the Democratic Party, because I'm like, yeah, they have a way harder job, and do they make mistakes? Absolutely, but their politicians are better, the outcomes are better, their platform is better, and better is better and worse is worse. Alrighty, Cuz 808 says, what political party has the most beautiful women? I don't care, Cuz 808. I don't believe in classifying the value of politics based on whose women are hotter. Xander says, Mamdani is socialist. I don't know why Dems are voting for him. Capitalism is a right-wing ideology. I'm not really sure what you mean by that, Xander, because Mamdani is a socialist is not exactly accurate. He calls himself a democratic socialist, which is different than being a straight socialist. I would love to talk to you about what you think socialism means, and why you think maybe capitalism is a right-wing ideology, or if that means that it's better or worse, Xander. I really want to make sure that you know that I'm cool with you DMing me, Xander, because I really want to get into some of these issues with you. Darkin says, are you considering that the midterms will be manipulated? The Republican Party is going to do everything they can to lie and cheat and voter suppress their way into victory, or at least less of a defeat in the midterms in 2026. And that is why we need to work extra hard to make sure that we unelect every Republican that we possibly fucking can, because they need to feel political retribution, not violence or anything like that. They need to feel consequences politically for the things that they have voted for the things that they are allowing Trump and his fucking billionaire, corrupt, racist pals to do, for the fact that Stephen Miller is running the country right now for some fucking reason. Republicans need to pay the price electorally for this, and we need to do the work to make that happen. Cheese says, what are your thoughts on Chicago having to fire all these school employees due to going over budget? I have not read that story, Cheese. I don't know if it's accurate, but I do not believe in firing school employees. We need to be investing more in our education. Kaz says, do you think there should be any restrictions on abortion? I believe that the restrictions that we had in place when Roe versus Wade was still the law of the land, they were fine. Those were good restrictions. An abortion could not take place after the point of viability outside the womb, meaning that if a fetus could survive on its own without the mother, you weren't allowed to have an abortion anymore. And I think that that was fine. And if there are people who who think that that was too lenient, you know, I would just say don't do that then. If you don't want to do that, you know. But if you want to decrease the number of abortions that happen, it is still the Democrats' platform that is going to do that, as opposed to the Republicans' platform. The Republicans making abortion illegal doesn't actually stop or even decrease the number of abortions. It just makes abortions more dangerous. It just makes pregnancy more dangerous for women. Rena, great to see you again. Thank you for being here. RM says Biden is the biggest piece of shit in the country. Well, he's already gone. Thank you, Rena. You did the absolute right thing there. Lynn Zoid the Noid says, why would I ever care about what a MAGA thinks? They support child grape. You know, Lynn Zoid the Noid, I do not believe in smearing the entire voting populace of the right with that, you know, phrase. I believe that there are a lot of politicians on the right and right-leaning talking heads who seem to be in that PDF file community. But let's, you know, have radical empathy for people who vote right wing, because there but for the grace of God go I. If we were born into those towns, into that information bubble, into that culture of right wing above everything else, Christianity equals Republican equals American equals good equals godly, then maybe we would be tricked into voting Republican. Alrighty. I Like a Hot Girl says, do you feel the military is a socialist model? I mean, it is. You know, every American pays into the taxes, and the taxes go to the military, for the military to be able to function. It is a socialist institution. Brandon Anon 171 says, I was born into that, not a good excuse. I'm really happy that you were able to get out of that, Brandon Anon, but not everybody is able to, you know. And I am not so, you know, I would love to believe that I'm that exact kind of genius who looks around and goes, this isn't right, but you never know. You never know what it would be like to grow up into that world. You do, you know, but maybe, you know, there's something specific about your situation that made it easier for you or harder for you. I don't know. I still believe in having radical empathy for people, Brandon. Ron Russell says, in today's constant slog of shit, how do you still find the ability to laugh and maintain an outlook focused on working to fix things instead of just giving up? The way I'm able to do that, Ron Russell, is by realizing this one important fact, which is that the bad guys, the billionaire class, the Republican Party, fucking Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Donald Trump, Stephen Miller, all of those people, the one thing that they want more than anything is for us to give up and for us to be hopeless, for us to be cynical, for us to throw our hands up in the air because we just don't care anymore. But that is not a gift that I am willing to give them. I say these people have fucking enough. They got private jets. They got golden fucking mega mansions and mega yachts. They're eating caviar and lobster 3 meals a day. They do not also get to have me giving up, my hopelessness, my cynicism. I refuse to give them that. And so, you know, I take breaks and I go to the movies with my wife, and I'm playing the video game Blueprints right now, and it is fucking dope as hell. It's really tickling my noodle. It's really cooking my noodle. And yeah, and then I get back to work because they don't get to have me giving up. All right. David Douglas says public role, schools, hospital, colleges equals socialism. Completely agree with that, David Douglas. Dan Blackwood says that plane Trump got from Qatar has an upstairs. That's obscene. Completely agree with that. Truth Matters says, I'm going to follow your lead, trying really hard not to be hopeless. Thank you, Truth Matters. Thank you for being a part of the thank you for being a part of the project, the work. Zokora says, based communist stream? I don't know if I would call myself a communist. I'm a progressive. Let's see here. Cuz808 says, what do you think of independence? I get it. There's a lot of information out there that makes it seem like both parties are the same, or the Democratic Party is worse than it actually is, or that the Republican Party is better than it actually is. So I get it. I get people falling for misinformation and propaganda. But I think that if you ask an independent what their policy preferences are, if you examine the ballot referendums that they support, if you are able to cut through the muck, you find that most of these people agree with the Democratic platform. They've just been lied to about what it is. They've just been lied to about certain policies that, you know, when they recognize what the reality of it is, you know, maybe they don't admit it, but it is essentially the Democratic platform that they want to be enacted. Jay Zuder says, do you think leftists spend too much time attacking Biden and the Dems? Yeah, I don't think that infighting is is productive, regardless of if it is progressives versus centrists, or Republican voters versus Democratic voters, or Republicans versus trans kids, or immigrants, or poor people, or whatever. I think we all need to be focused on who the real enemies are, and that is the billionaire class and the right-wing politicians that are working with them. Ethan Walschlager says, sorry, I was gone for a while. Our backup generator died and we had to check if our power was back. Oh, I hope that you guys have electricity now, Lauren says, why didn't Biden release the Epstein files when he had the chance? So presidents are supposed to maintain a separation between themselves and the Department of Justice. That means not talking to the Attorney General about who to open investigations in. It means not talking to the FBI about what files they are or are not allowed to release. So where Trump is doing the opposite and he's trying to exercise unilateral control over the entire government, that's not what America is supposed to be. It is supposed to be separation of powers, checks and balances, etc. So, Donald Trump calling up the Attorney General or letting Stephen Miller be the shadow Attorney General of America is wildly unethical and unconstitutional. So Biden did not have control over what information got released regarding the Epstein files. The person that was in charge of that was Christopher Wray, who was appointed by Donald Trump. And so if you want to know why Christopher Wray did not release that information, if you want to know why Trump FBI Director Christopher Wray did not release the Epstein files, you'll have to ask Christopher Wray. Let's see here. Jim's Colt says, please stop crying already. I'm not crying. Your mom was last night. Fog War Production says, how can the Democratic Party be more culturally sensitive towards GOP demographics? I find that the Democratic Party is. I find that online people aren't. And I think that this is intentional and inorganic. I think that adversarial nations like Russia and the billionaire class have created a culture of what it means to be left-wing on the internet. And it is really easy to do that with bots and anonymous accounts who say, I'm a leftist and I think every Republican voter should die, shit like that. And I think it's fake. And I think that we need to recognize that it's fake. That I do not take at face value that the right-wing people that I meet on the internet represent the right-wing people that exist in reality. And so I would hope that people on the right afford people on the left the exact same luxury. Because I will meet these people all the time who will tell me, I don't like the Republican Party, but I'm just so tired of purity politics. And I'm like, I have met zero people who believe in purity politics, Alrighty. Cuz 808 says Hawaii's minimum wage is $14 an hour. I think that's ridiculous. How can we change this? I mean, I don't think that it should be changed. I think it should probably be higher, Cuz 808. But if you don't believe in that, then vote. That's the way that you change things. Hanzi Sec 1 Twitch says, I was thinking about the concept of setting a maximum net worth someone can have and just having the state take the excess. But that would have to be worldwide or else they just run away, and it seems a very difficult thing to execute. What are your thoughts on that idea, and if it's doable? So there are a bunch of different mechanisms by which we can do some sort of economic redistribution, which is, I think, essential. I think it is 100% necessary that we do that, because income inequality is worse right now than it was during the Gilded Age, which, if you don't know, was an age that we named over how bad the income inequality was back then. And it's worse now. So how do we do that? Taxing the rich, creating some sort of, maximum net worth. Somebody on my live stream suggested giving money an expiration date, meaning that it loses value if you just hold on to it, and it has to go into the economy in some version in order to still be viable. And I think all these are really cool ideas, but I don't really die on any specific mountain. I will say that we need to start ignoring billionaires when they threaten us, when they say, we're going to leave, we're going to take our company and go somewhere else, we're going to take all of our billions of dollars and go to a different country instead. Because if we always acquiesce to that billionaire threat, it is always going to be there. because what we're trying to do is take away their money and their power, make them less, take somebody who's worth $50 billion and make them worth $500 or $900 million, and I will cry exactly 0 tears for them. But if we don't do that because they threaten us, then they will get even more money and even more power to threaten us going forward, until eventually we're just living in a new fucking aristocracy where the rich people get to do whatever they want. They can fucking hunt us for sport and poison us with the chemical runoff from their factories and shit like that. So yeah, it is important that we ignore them, because also all the things that they say are bullshit. They're always threatening to leave. They're always threatening, oh, we're not going to be able to hire as many people. We're not going to be able to open this new factory here, blah, blah, blah. And every time that they have been, they've had their feet held to the fire, we have discovered that their threats are bullshit, are entirely bullshit. So yeah, I say tell them leave if they're threatening to leave. They're threatening to fire a bunch of people if we raise the minimum wage. Fucking fire a bunch of people. There will be other industries that pop up because you will not be able to provide as much to your customers if you fire all of those people. Alrighty. I Light a Hot Girl says, do you feel like Anakin was wrong to off the younglings for the Empire and join it? I Light a Hot Girls, I'm going to say something controversial but brave. I do think that Anakin Skywalker was wrong to off the younglings for the Empire and join it. Alrighty, everybody. I am going to get out of here. It is an hour and 15 into the live stream, but I just want to say thank you, everybody, for being here. Zonia, great to see you again. Thank you for being part of the live stream. Everybody that I said on this live stream to please hit me up. My DMs are open. My emails are open. Xander, I really want to get into your political beliefs with you. Let's really discuss this. Let's really engage on this. I want to know what you think socialism means and what you think the value of capitalism is and shit like that, But yeah, just thank you guys. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of the live stream. Thank you for all your questions and your gifts and your likes and your shares. I appreciate any support that you can give this channel, whether it is the free kind or the paid kind. If you want to support financially, you can, but you don't have to. I have a Patreon that you can join. I've got 4 patrons. They're the fucking best. I would love to have a 5th. And you can also buy things from my store. I got a store that's up on my website. That's also where you can find my Patreon, jaredperenstein.com. That is where you can find my streaming schedule and my stand-up schedule, and any other cool projects that I'm doing will be listed there. If there were any questions that you want answered still or that you think of later, my DMs are open. Email me through my website. This project of mine of unelecting every Republican is not done when the live stream is over. So do not be shy about reaching out. I am here for the project. And if you want to know more about how to do the project, check out my Discord. I've got great resources there for how to be involved, what podcasts or books to check out to give you more information on this topic. And lastly, just my heartfelt plea that y'all will do the work, because the only way that we get out of this is if we do the work and we recruit other people to do the work as well. That is the only way that we get out of this. I can't do this all by myself, guys. And the more people that do the work, the less work that we all have to do individually. Bane says the Jedi tried to kill the Chancellor, though. Well, he was a Sith, Noisy says, how do you feel about Dem voters in overpopulated cities moving to red areas? Democrats are not moving to red areas because they want to. They're moving because they have to, because cost of living has gotten so bad, and that is entirely the fault of the Republican Party, Donald Trump, and the billionaire class. Alrighty, Alive and Washed says, what are you going to do when Gavin Newsom gets cooked in the 2028 election? I mean, I'll be upset if any Democrat loses in 2028, the same way that I get upset if any Democrat is going to lose in the midterms, But I don't have any specific love for Gavin Newsom as a candidate. So if he gets cooked in the primary, I say fucking get cooked. Get cooked. All right, everybody. I'm out of here. Be good to yourselves. Self-care is part of the work. Be good to everybody else. And I will catch you guys here tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel. Our stream's going to be a little earlier tomorrow because I got lunch with an old buddy. All right, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.